The Edmund Fitzgerald began as an idea on paper and a calculation in steel. It was designed for a straightforward purpose: to carry iron ore pellets across the Great Lakes with maximum speed and maximum capacity. Yet from the moment its keel was laid, something about the ship drew attention. It would become a symbol of the lakes themselves: vast, powerful, and unpredictable. The vessel was commissioned by Northwestern Mutual Life Insurance Company. At the time, the company was looking to diversify its investments. Ore carriers had become reliable assets on the Great Lakes, steady, profitable, and essential to American industry. In 1957, the company ordered what would become one of the largest ships ever to sail the inland seas. The ship was constructed at the Great Lakes Engineering Works in River Rouge, Michigan. On the slipway, its scale was unmistakable. When completed, the Edmund Fitzgerald measured 729 feet from bow to stern. It stood nearly 40 feet high above the main deck. Fully loaded, it displaced more than 26,000 tons. That made it the largest ship on the Great Lakes at the time of its launch, and it would keep that unofficial title for many years, known simply as the Queen of the Lakes. Yet its immense size was not just for record-keeping. The Great Lakes were a major trade artery. By the mid-20th century, ore carriers ran a continuous circuit from the Minnesota Iron Ranges to steel mills in Detroit, Cleveland, and Toledo. A ship that could haul more material per trip meant greater efficiency for every link in that chain. The Edmund Fitzgerald was designed to do exactly that, and to do it at high speed. On June 7, 1958, the ship was launched into the Detroit River. It was a ceremonial moment that drew thousands of onlookers. The vessel entered the water cleanly, sliding down greased timbers before settling with a heavy roll. During the launch, the ship unexpectedly hit the water with more force than anticipated, causing a crowd wave along the shore. It was a small reminder of the mass contained in that steel frame and of the power it would harness when underway. When the outfitting was complete, the ship was placed under the operation of the Columbia Transportation Division of the Ogle Bay Norton Company. Its primary role was direct, to transport taconite pellets from western Lake Superior to the lower lakes. Over the next 17 years, the vessel would complete hundreds of these runs. It became a familiar sight on the horizon, its long silhouette framed against the grey-blue waters of the lakes. Life aboard an ore carrier followed rhythms as steady as the ship's engines. A full crew complement usually numbered around 29 men. They included deckhands, officers, engineers, cooks, and specialists in navigation and maintenance. Shifts rotated around the clock. The ship seldom slept. And though it was built for efficiency, it was also known for its comfort, at least by shipping standards. The Edmund Fitzgerald included modern facilities for the era, such as air conditioning and comfortable quarters for officers and crew. Sailors who served aboard the ship often spoke of its speed. At full power, it could reach more than 14 knots, quick for a vessel of its size. It was, as many noted, a good riding ship. That reputation contributed to its mystique. It was large, efficient, and reliable. It had a certain presence, a quality that made people notice. It became a favourite among the shipping community. The ship also built a connection with the public. It frequently broke its own hauling records. Newspapers occasionally covered its achievements. As the largest vessel on the lakes, it carried with it a certain prestige. Tourists watched from shore whenever it passed through the Sulocks. Photographers captured it against cliffs, trees, and open water. The Edmund Fitzgerald became a floating landmark, a symbol of the might of 20th century American shipping. Its captain for much of its career was Peter Pulser. He was known for his sense of showmanship. He sometimes treated watchers along the shore to a tune by running music over the ship's loudspeakers while passing. Freight operations were not typically associated with fanfare, yet Pulser's small touches helped cement the Fitzgerald as something more than a working vessel. It became a fixture of the lakes, recognizable, talked about, and admired. But admiration and familiarity did not diminish the reality of the environment the ship sailed through. The Great Lakes form the largest group of freshwater bodies on Earth. They behave like inland seas, vast enough to produce strong winds, high waves, and sudden changes in weather. Lake Superior, in particular, has a reputation shaped by centuries of navigation. It is deep, cold, and often unpredictable. For mariners, Superior commanded respect. Indigenous nations had long understood this. Ojibwe oral traditions describe the lake as a place of power, capable of calm, beauty, and sudden danger. Many early explorers and missionaries learned those lessons firsthand. By the 20th century, mariners had countless accounts of storms that rose suddenly and with surprising strength. Ships disappeared with little warning. Others ran aground in blinding snow, heavy fog, or the long black nights of early winter. Lake Superior's geography contributes to those risks. The lake stretches for more than 350 miles, running west to east. When winds align with its length, waves can build quickly. In late fall, when the temperature difference between water and air increases, the lake can behave with uncommon ferocity. Mariners refer to these conditions as the Witch of November, a name built from generations of experience. By the time the Edmund Fitzgerald entered service, shipping companies knew these risks well. Radar, radio communication, and improved forecasting helped, but they could not eliminate the dangers of a lake that produced storms rivaling those found on open oceans. Crews trained to monitor barometric pressure, wind direction, and cloud formations. Masters planned routes carefully, but even caution had limits, particularly in the busy shipping season before winter ice arrived. Despite the challenges, the Fitzgerald's career was largely uneventful. It carried millions of tons of taconite. It completed run after run between Superior, Wisconsin, and Detroit River terminals. The ship maintained its reputation for speed and reliability. Its service record seemed to reflect the confidence placed in it at launch. By the early 1970s, though, the lakes had begun to see incremental changes. Ships grew larger. Load lines were pushed closer to maximum thresholds. Navigation routes remained busy, even as crews felt the pressure of tight schedules near season's end. The Fitzgerald operated in this environment, still performing well, but always subject to the same hazards faced by all vessels on Superior. One detail that would later become significant was the ship's design. The Fitzgerald, like many ore carriers of its time, had a long deck with 21 cargo hatches. These hatches were fitted with clamps and seals designed to keep water out. They were inspected regularly, yet heavy seas could test even the best equipment. The long, uninterrupted deck also meant the vessel could flex slightly in rough weather. This characteristic was well understood, but in extreme conditions it could stress the ship in ways difficult to measure. Crews who served aboard the ship in its early years reported no serious structural issues. Routine maintenance was performed at regular intervals. The ship underwent inspections according to Coast Guard requirements. Official records show that the Fitzgerald remained in good standing throughout its career. Still, the lakes kept their own counsel. In quiet moments, mariners spoke of the unpredictability of Superior, recalling ships that had vanished or broken apart in storms. Tales of the Mataafa blow of 1905 or the Armistice Day storm of 1940 were still known among sailors. These memories formed a kind of oral tradition, a reminder that experience and preparation could reduce risk but never eliminate it entirely. As the 1975 shipping season approached its end, the Fitzgerald continued to operate with its usual efficiency. By November, the crew prepared for what would be one of the last runs of the year. The ship had completed hundreds of voyages. It was well known to ports, lockmasters, and radio operators across the lakes. There was little reason to think the upcoming trip would be any different from the many that came before. The ship's regular captain, Ernest McSorley, was respected in the maritime community. He had spent decades on the lakes navigating every kind of weather the region could produce. His demeanor was calm, practical, and disciplined. Colleagues described him as someone who understood both the capabilities of his vessel and the temperament of the lakes. Under his command, the Fitzgerald maintained its strong record. As November progressed, weather patterns across the upper Midwest began shifting. Cold air masses moved south. Low-pressure systems formed over the Great Plains before sweeping toward the lakes. Meteorologists monitored these patterns closely. Mariners understood that November storms followed a familiar cycle, yet each system had its own shape, its own timing, and its own potential to grow into something larger. To most observers on shore, the season's final weeks simply meant colder air and the early onset of winter, but to ship crews, it signaled a period requiring careful attention. The Witch of November was less a legend and more a seasonal presence that carried real weight. The Fitzgerald's crew prepared the ship for another routine load at the Burlington Northern Dock in Superior, Wisconsin. Cargo operations were efficient. Railway cars delivered taconite pellets, which cascaded through chutes and filled the ship's long holds. The process had a rhythm born of long practice. When fully loaded, the ship would ride lower in the water, its bow nearly brushing the surface. But this was normal for lake freighters. They were designed for heavy loads and for maximizing cargo space. As loading continued, weather reports provided updates on a developing low-pressure system. It showed potential for strengthening as it moved across the plains. Ships across the lakes took note. But these conditions were common for November. Mariners had long experience with similar patterns. Most vessels continued their schedules while monitoring the forecasts. The Fitzgerald was scheduled to depart after loading was complete. Its destination was a steel mill near Detroit. The timing was tight, but typical for the end of the season. Crews often aimed to complete as many runs as possible before the lakes closed for winter. In the hours before departure, final checks were made. Navigation equipment was inspected. Radio communications were tested. Engine crews confirmed that the machinery was ready for another long run. For the Fitzgerald, this was another day in a long sequence of voyages stretching back nearly 2 decades. The ship eased away from the dock, guided by tugboats as it maneuvered into open water. It began its journey toward Whitefish Bay, following a route well established by years of travel. Other vessels were also underway. Among them was the Arthur M. Anderson, a ship that would become closely linked with the Fitzgerald in the hours ahead. As the vessel settled into its pace, its long hull cutting through the cold surface of Superior, few aboard would have imagined that this final trip would become one of the most studied maritime events in the history of the Great Lakes. The ship, that had once been known for breaking cargo records and attracting watchers along the shore, was beginning a voyage that would instead be remembered for the mystery surrounding its end. Yet here, in the early stages of that journey, the story remained steady and familiar. A well-built ship, a seasoned captain, a hard-working crew, and the vast inland sea that had carried them safely on so many voyages before. Lake Superior spread out in all directions, cold, deep, and ancient. The Edmund Fitzgerald moved north and east, its engines maintaining a steady rhythm. Above deck, crews monitored instruments, scanned the horizon, and felt the first hints of shifting wind that signaled the arrival of changing weather. The journey ahead would follow a path traveled hundreds of times. But as the ship advanced into the center of the lake, the developing storm system grew stronger. Air pressure fell, winds increased, waves began to rise. These were the first signs of the conditions that would shape everything to come. For now, though, the ship remained on course, moving toward the open expanse of Superior, and into the final chapter of its long service on the lakes.